Hello, students, and any other people watching. I'm not quite sure who you are, but welcome to you as well. Alright, so as we go through history and different topics and other things throughout this YouTube channel, the question I think a lot of people have is where the heck does all this information come from? What is history? It happened in the past, but what do we learn? Why do we look at different things and not others? Well, it's all a lot of good questions. Because, we're looking at thousands of years of history, and every single human has history behind them. So the question is what's important and who determines what we learn and what we think is valuable from the past and what we should know. So there's a lot of people that are involved in this process. Certainly there's people that look like this, who look at and they point at things that look old, and they say, look, this is history here, look at this. I found some history, look, I dug it up. We also could have some people that look like this, who are like, I am staring at history, but there's a very scary skull behind me. Look at history. And then certainly there's people like, hey, it's me who finds history, and it's like, look at this guy, I'm going to talk to him about history. Because he's dressed up like an old historian person. So today we're looking at what kind of people, apart from these, it's fictional, and certainly Mr. Shea isn't super finding great history from that hat. But we're going to look at where that history comes from. So one of the first spots, one of the first groups of people that really, especially in the far distant past, finding evidence and stories are archaeologists. And archaeologists look at material remains. So they look at evidence, at remains, at artifacts that really are left behind. Many of them are dug up, but certainly there's archaeologists that work in the oceans, so they can find shipwrecks. But really they're finding the remains of people, the remains of what people have left behind. And these remains often are called artifacts, and they are made by a human being. So artifacts would not include something that wasn't made by a human being. So Jack, if you're out there, when you brought in a pine cone, that was not in fact an artifact. That was just simply a pine cone. So it was not made by humans. Now, archaeologists are digging up not just remains of artifacts, but also remains of humans. So we have bodies and skulls that are brought up. So we have archaeologists that discover these things, which are in turn studied by others, but also things like pots and toys and stone tools and all sorts of things that can give us a better picture of what exists in a time period, especially that we don't really have anything written down. And that's really the most difficult part, and what we're going to start with are those periods of time in human history that we don't have any writing. So we really have to try to fill in the blanks with these remains, with these artifacts that we find that can tell us a bit of how humans lived. Also, we have our anthropologists, and certainly there's an anthropologist right there on the right, looking at some skulls, perhaps the skull that was seen in the last slide. And anthropologists, they study humans, and really what they're studying is cultures. So they're not simply just looking at artifacts, but they're trying to figure out how cultures, how groups of people interacted, and how they lived. And there's a number of different kinds of archaeologists. You can, if you've ever seen the show Bones, there's forensic archaeologists that look at mostly bones and what happened to the people. But anthropologists are really looking at cultures and the interactions of these groups. They can study tribes throughout the world and really try to understand how we developed as people, how we developed as groups of people, to go from really a tribal society, like you can see here in this picture, to today we're on computers and have a far more developed, in many senses, society today. And so we have all these archaeologists that are digging up old artifacts and trying to figure out how people lived. We have anthropologists understanding how people interacted with each other. We have geographers who are looking at certainly all of those things, but they are looking at how humans interact with their environment. So geographers want to understand how groups of people interact with the different landforms. In this instance, we have some mountains, in how they interact with the oceans. So are they fishermen, or are they staying away from there? So it's really how humans use their environment to shape the way they live. And an environment is really just the surroundings where humans operate. So it's really the particular landscape around a settlement of people. And I think the important thing to note for all of social studies is this isn't just simply like, here's an old map, and here's old things, and here's dead things, and these people aren't alive anymore. This is a constantly changing and studied genre of study for geographers. So they're looking at things of, here's Cape Cod, and how do humans use the land on the Cape? And they create maps like this to understand really how humans are interacting with the environment, with the landscape that surrounds them, of what's being farmed, where are people building houses, what kind of land is open. So we have a lot of studies that geographers do that really try to figure out how humans and the land kind of shape each other. And with all of that, all of those people, you finally have historians. And you probably think of historians kind of looking like this. It's one fairly old, confused maybe, but very smart man sitting, or woman, sitting in a office surrounded by books and a typewriter, and you're like, I didn't even know typewriters existed anymore. This is odd. But historians, they're taking all of this information, and they're studying everything that has been found by archaeologists, everything that's studied by anthropologists, the research done by geographers, and really trying to create a whole picture. So they're not simply looking at just one artifact, but they're trying to put all of these clues together to give the public a better idea of their history, of their past, of our past, and really inform us better about what happened to humans and how some good things happened and we should do it again, or the things that we want to avoid, how to avoid doing that as well. Now, historians generally write books. Certainly they also make movies and create other sorts of things. They are not all these very old, close to death humans. This is my buddy Dave. He is not old or close to death. He is a simple human who is a historian. So historians can take really any shape and form. It's just people who love to try to create that picture, create that story of how humans have lived. So throughout the year, we're going to be looking at evidence that all of these people collect. And all of these people work together to really help us understand and think about where we have come from and try to inform us better about where we will go.